It's already happened twice today and it may happen now, so I apologize. But I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for what you do. Thank you for inviting us to be with you guys. I mean, it is a huge privilege to be with you in all that you all do throughout this world. But just know, y'all have a very, very special place in our heart. And we're just grateful to be here. So with that, we're going to be talking something that I have probably taught on more than any other subject is this. Dear Pastor, what Marketplace believers wish their pastor knew. Let me give this set up just a little bit, and then we're going to dive in. First off, my name is Bill Tibbits, and I do now work for the Stonetable. But prior to working with the Stonetable, I was in international finance. And I did that on the East Coast of the United States and puddle-topped between Washington, D.C. and New York City for several years. I was also just ended it, but I was a venture capitalist for over 20 years where we purchased and owned medical device companies and sold them to larger conglomerates. And also been a small business owner. But the thing that I'm probably most known for and probably get introduced most by is I used to be the academic dean of the College of Business and Technology at North Central University in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I left that just a year ago to move over and start working with my very, very good friend, Eric Cooper. Oh my goodness, Dave's in here too. That's nervous, like preaching in front of my dad. All right, here we go. Be guys to smile and wave, okay? Yes, you, I'm talking to you. All right? Dave and I used to work together several years ago, and I just love him deeply. But I want to share just a little bit of how I got to the point where this ended up being a soapbox message for me and something I've been sharing for many years. I was 20-something, and I did not grow up in a Christian home, and I'm going to share a little bit more about what happened right after college, but I constantly found myself trying to understand what it meant to be a Christian in the marketplace. I don't think it was to anyone's fault or any pastor's fault, but what seemed to happen, kind of maybe through osmosis and my own immaturity and my own broken theology, it just kind of felt like pastors and missionaries were like the superheroes of Christianity, and everyone else was like Robin. If we're going to talk about DC characters, we're all running around with green tight underwear and yellow capes, just embarrassing ourselves while Batman is being Batman, you know? And what I'm going to be sharing today, I want to make very, very crystal clear. I am by no means going to try to bring down pastoral ministry or missions at all. Never will ever do that. What I am going to try to do is try to elevate just a little bit marketplace ministry and put it at the place that I think biblically it stands. So with that in mind, I have been doing research with marketplace ministry and believers for now almost 30 years. From doing research for dissertations to speaking at engagements like this, men's conferences alike. It's been awesome. And I have a lot of data points. So what I thought would be really interesting is to bring to you today the 4 questions I have gotten asked the most by marketplace believers and the responses that I provide them. This is a training tool for you. Now, some of you can be like, yep, I've seen this, I get it. I don't understand, and I'd like some feedback when we get to that portion at the end. Excuse me, that meat, I found a piece of meat in my tooth right there. It just came out. There it went. We'll edit that part out, okay? Piece of meat flying out my mouth. I literally have no game and no shame. So I'm like, it's totally fine. We're totally fine. Oh, now Eric's here. Now my boss and best friend's here. All right, this is great. I don't know what I was saying. I'm going to try to elevate and bring together. Oh, 4 questions. This is training. So one of the things I often see a lot is I've yet to find a vocational pastor who disagrees with what I'm about to share with you, yet They will not disagree, and yet I will find them go into the next sermon and teach something very contrary to what we just discussed. So there's a disconnect there that I'm not quite understanding, and I will discover hopefully in the future. But please know, when we go through these 4 questions, I hope to provide you the tools, very, very simple, that I've been using for the last 20 plus years in these areas. I will say this, I believe this. Revival will happen if we can get our marketplace believers to understand that their work matters to God. Because it breaks the divide, it breaks that bivocation, it breaks that compartmentalizing Jesus in their lives. Wouldn't we like to have a church full of people who are not compartmentalizing their lives? That's where change is going to happen. I really believe that. And I'm not speaking just on behalf of an American culture. I'm talking about around the world. Okay? So with that in mind, let's dive into question number 1. Also, isn't that a cool graphic? I really like that graphic. I found it last night. I'll tell you a story later on. All right, here we go. Number 1 question. Am I less called, quote unquote, because I'm not a pastor or a missionary? Am I less called because I'm not a pastor or missionary? This is probably the number 1 question I get. Let me do this just for fun. I thought it'd be, because I gotta be honest, that statement kind of feels really academic, and I'm not sure I've ever heard anyone say it just like that. So I had some fun, and I decided, well, how would the different generations ask the same question? So we're gonna laugh, all right? They get progressively funnier as we go on. So the boomers, do we have any boomers in here? That is I expected you. I've got so many jokes built up right now, but I'll hold off. I'll just be nice for now. All right, boomers. We love you, boomers. This is how I hear the boomers ask this question. I've supported the church my whole life. That right there is factual, data-driven. But I've always wondered, did I miss my calling by going into business instead of ministry? Right? Every one of those words up there is very boomer-centric, I promise you, okay? Where are my Gen Xers? Yes! Best generation ever, because we do not give a flying flip about anything. Say whatever you want. We don't care. We raised ourselves, right? You can't say anything that will hurt us. And I specifically put it in black because that is our color, right? We rebel. There you go. Gen X. I show up, work with integrity, provide for my family. That's a very Gen X statement right there. Their goal was to provide for their family. Boomers felt there was more success-driven. And Gen X, we started to become more relational because we were ignored. And so out of our hurt, we decided to parent differently and live our lives differently. But sometimes I wonder, is that enough for God? So whenever I talk to Gen Xers in this space, is always, am I doing enough for God? I even had this struggle just a couple of months ago. I was talking to Eric. I'm like, I'm in this weird space, headspace. Am I doing enough? Am I doing enough? And that's not a great space to be in. Millennials. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We love you, millennials. We love you, millennials. We do. You a special group. But I feel like millennials are starting to be forgotten about a little bit. I don't know what happened, but you guys, we need to step up. You guys, I love millennials because millennials are very cause-driven. They are the cause-driven generation. This is how I hear millennials say it. I love Jesus, and I work hard, but is 8 to 5 just paying the bills, or does it actually matter to God? Okay, so that's closer to the original question. Now, do I have any Gen Zers? Let's go. Let's go, Gen Z. Listen, I'm hanging my hat on Jesus and Gen Z. I think Gen Z is going to get it. I think boomers, by God's grace, taught us to obey. And Gen X was like, no, it's about loving Jesus. And then I think millennials and Gen Zs are going to finally put the two together and say, yes, it's about truth and love. Right? I think Gen Z and millennials are the ones that are going to put it together. This is my favorite. So, like, Is my job even heaven work? We don't say Jesus now, we say heaven work. If I'm not church verified, or am I just out here vibing for the Lord with no credentials? And this statement was created using ChatGPT, right? The bottom line, though, is, yeah, you take the pictures because it resonates, right? It resonates. What I think is interesting is the theme, there's a red line that's running through all of this. It really, goodness me, really breaks my heart. It's hard for me to say. Everyone's asking, does my work matter? And sometimes when we're in ministry, we I don't know if we can always relate to that, to be honest. I know we can, but imagine living a life where 40 hours of your passion, drive, and everything is feeling like it's being discounted. But we're told to be living for Christ. And it is a massive, massive internal battle for many, right? So I'd like to share with you just a quick story. People are still getting pictures. I've been asked about PowerPoints and stuff. Can I just send them to you guys and you guys just send them out? I think all speakers do that maybe. Okay. All right, just a quick story. So, Cincinnati, I'm a Cincinnati kid here. And when I went to college, I had just accepted Christ. So I was a young believer, which honestly was kind of the best because you didn't quite know what was sin, but you still kind of felt you loved Jesus. So you had one toe in sin and one toe in Jesus, and best life ever. I'm totally joking. That's not good. But I was so excited because I'm learning this Jesus thing, and I felt called. I'm using that word loosely. I felt very called to be a journalist. Has anyone ever heard of the book or the movie, All the President's Men? It's based on the Watergate scandal and Nixon. I got my hands on that book way too young, and it just kind of captivated me for this idea of discovery and detective work as a journalist. And so I went to college. I went to Purdue University to study journalism, and I was very, very excited to eventually get a job at a major newspaper. And the place that I was aiming for was the Cincinnati Enquirer. And this is the Cincinnati Enquirer. It's a big, big newspaper in Cincinnati, Ohio, in the States. And I was pumped. I was pumped to go to my very first job, real job after college. And this is the picture that I took of our cubicles. So it was cool back in the 90s to work in cubicles. There was like some sense of power. Now we're like, you probably have the worst job in the world if you work in the cubicle, right? But back in the day, and the fact that our cubicles were like half the wall versus like the 8-foot, 6-foot wall or whatever it was, made it even cooler with our little computer there. I remember the day very distinctly, going to that first job. I was prepared to not only be a great journalist, but I was really prepared to save everybody and make money to give it to the church, right? But this was my calling, and I was excited. So I walked into my area, my cubicle, and over here, it was interesting. I had 3 kind of partners. This was Jim, this was another Jim, and this was Janelle, all J's, right? And I walked in and met the first Jim. Early in the morning, I had just gotten my ID, still have that ID, and I met the first Jim. Now, I'm sure he wasn't, but it felt like a David Goliath kind of moment. I just remember Jim just being so tall, like abnormally like 9 feet tall, kind of David kind of thing. He wasn't, but he was just a very, very big man, very tall, big beard. And of course, he was a sports journalist. He fit every stereotype. And he walked up to me. Now, I'm not going to cuss, so be prepared. I'm not cussing. But he goes, "Hey, Bill, how the F are you doing?" And puts his hand out and starts shaking my hand. I'm like, oh, good. Nice to meet you, Jim. And then we start talking. And every other word that came out of Jim's mouth was a cuss word. And here's my little baby innocent Christian ears trying to figure out what did it mean to fulfill this calling for Christ, to get this person saved. And it was shocking, right? It was very, very shocking. But then after a while, I started to respect him because he was like a poet, just with cuss words though. It was like Shakespearean, you know? And so I went from like being highly offensed, having offense towards it, to like, wow, like we should like document this. And it was just amazing and brilliant. But it was still, I didn't quite know what it meant. I didn't quite know what it meant to love Jesus there in that moment. Over here was Janelle. And she came in a little bit later that day, one of the nicest people in the world. And I walked over to her cubicle, and it was on the shared wall, the same wall that we shared. But I walked over, and this was the 90s, so it was a little bit of a different time than it is today. But she had very explicit art, naked art, pinned to her wall. And I'm like, oh, hey, Janelle, how you doing? You know, keep my eyes up to heaven, you know, kind of thing. I'm like, what in the world is going on? And I found out that she was a special kind of dancer on the weekends, you know? And I'm like, okay. Like, what do I say on Monday? Hey, Janelle, how was the poll this weekend? Like, what do you say to that? I had no idea what to say or what to do, you know? You didn't laugh. This is where the tension hit, though. As I was sitting there typing away and trying to live out my dream job, my calling, I could not figure out what it meant to love Jesus here in this moment. I had no idea. I had a conflict. And I ended up leaving that job after 6 months. So it was something I had been dreaming about since I was about 10. I'd left it and I went to go work at a nonprofit. Because Jesus is in nonprofits, right? Nonprofits are really important to the kingdom. Not being a journalist for the Cincinnati Enquirer. I hear stories like this pretty frequently. Here's the first thing I like to say. Calling is not the same thing as assignment. Calling and assignment are not the same thing. But I will say this. We use the word calling inaccurately a lot. A lot. Now, I do believe that Scripture shows us there are times where God will give us a very specific direction, all right? Very, very, very specific. But this is what I like to teach individuals who I'm engaging with in the marketplace. Calling is this thing that is unchanging. Calling is your identity in Christ. Calling is what Christ has asked us all to do. And if you want to summarize that, very simple. Go love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And then go love your neighbor. That is your calling. We all have the same calling. But many of us have different assignments. And I think we like to mix up calling and assignment quite a bit. Right? So going back to that question, am I less called because I'm not a pastor or a missionary? Right? No, you're not, because we have the same calling. Right? We have a similar calling in the sense that we're all called to love the Lord your God and love our neighbor. Assignment is the specific role or place where we serve in for a season. 2, assignments change, calling does not. And it's interesting, if we all get this, even those that are vocational pastors and missionaries, it really does impact how we handle change in our life, right? And also, this idea of calling versus assignment, well, if we're all called to love the Lord your God, well, I'm supposed to do that when I go to church on Sunday, when I go to work from 8 to 5, when I go out to eat, when I drive my car, when I engage with telemarketers on the phone, whatever it is, calling does not have boundaries, but we put boundaries on it. Too often we confuse the two and wrap our identity in job title or role. When we get this right, we hold our roles with open hands and stay faithful wherever God places us. I think the new and final Mission Impossible movie is coming out. Does anyone else watch those Mission Impossible movies? I love those movies, right? I'm give me some popcorn and soda and watch things blow up and all that. If you notice, Tom Cruise, when he runs, he has a very special run. He runs with his hands open, right? I love that. That's how the Flash, DC, that's how he runs too, right? I appreciate that. But I always say, I want to live my life with my hands open like Tom Cruise runs, right? My calling doesn't change, but my assignment might, and I want to live with open hands. Here's an illustration that I use quite often, and this kind of hits home the point. Here's my question. Can a marketing director fulfill their calling in Christ? Can this person fulfill their calling in Christ as a marketing director? The answer would be yes. Can they love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, strength? Can they love your? Yeah, they can, absolutely. So yes. Can a teacher fulfill their calling? This person fulfill their calling as the teacher? The answer would be yes. Here we go. Can this individual who's a pastor, can they fulfill their calling and be a pastor? Yes, absolutely. Okay, so let's go back. Let's do this again. Can you not fulfill your calling and be a marketing director? Yes. Meaning, can someone be a marketing director and not love God and not love their neighbors? Yep. Can someone be a teacher and not fulfill their calling? Meaning they don't love God and they don't love others? Yep. I hate this one, and because unfortunately I know some of us have had these experiences. Can a pastor not fulfill their calling and not love God and not love neighbor? Unfortunately, yes. Okay? Calling is not dependent on assignment. Assignment is dependent on calling, though. Can be. But calling is not dependent on assignment. No title in red has any impact on the calling necessarily. Right? It does not matter. We are all called to go love the Lord our God with our heart, soul, mind, and strength. Okay? All right. Here's a couple of scriptures I tend to share. And depending on the ability of the length of the conversation, depends on how much of scriptures we dive into. But one of my favorite is obviously Colossians 1, 19 through 28. It's weird to share scriptures with people who know the word much better than I do. But for God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things. That's a very powerful message right there. Reconcile to himself all things. Not just church things, not just work things, not things over here, not things over here. All things are reconciled to him. Whether things on earth or... he's like making it crystal clear. Hey, Bill, all things. Not just on earth, but in heaven too. That means space and time is included in this by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. So I'm asking for you to consider that calling and assignment may not be the same thing. Another scripture, 1 Peter 2:9. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, so that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Because we have this bivocation sometimes in our minds as marketplace leaders, sometimes we're like, well, that's the pastor's job, right? Well, I'll bring them to church and they can get saved at church. But I'm not going to do that, right? One of the things we say in our house is we try to move people. We say our neighbors go from our driveway to our dining room table, then to church. We don't invite them to church first. So no one gets invited to church unless they've been invited to our dining room table first. Because we all carry the responsibility of sharing the gospel. And sometimes us marketplace people will push that to the side to the vocational specialist. All right, so that's question number one. We good? All right. And this may be challenging some things that you believe have been taught, and that's totally cool. Just write it down, and all I ask is chew on it and spit out the bones, which is a great statement. I think I learned that from David Delp, actually. Chew on it and spit out the bones, which is a great way of not taking any accountability or responsibility for anything that you say. It's a great, great lesson I learned from him. All right, last quote from Os Guinness. All work done in faith and obedience is spiritual work. I love that quote. It's an incredible quote. All work done in faith and obedience is spiritual work. And that's a discipline to believe. It is very hard to work through a 50-page Excel document that has 1,000 cells on every page and be like, oh, this is for the kingdom. No, it's not. This is straight from the devil, is what I feel, right? But it's true. It's true. All right, let's go to our next question. Question number 2. Does God actually care about my 9-to-5 job? Right? This feels like God cares more about what happens on Sunday and Wednesday nights or special events. But my 9-to-5, I don't know. All right, so how would a baby boomer, how would David Delp say this? David would say, I've worked hard my whole life. But does God really care? He's got that crackly old boomer voice. But does God really care about what I did from 9 to 5 or just what I did on Sundays? All right, Gen Xers, does my daily grind, because we think we work the hardest, does my daily grind mean anything to God? Or is this just what responsible adults do until heaven? There's a lot of key words in there from boomers, or Gen Xers, excuse me. Millennials, so is my work actually sacred? Or am I just hustling with a Jesus sticker on my water bottle? I want purpose with my paycheck, not just burnout like my dad. All right, Gen Zers. Are my jobs like spiritually legit? Or is this just capitalism with a cross on it? I feel like I'm just bumping with a Jesus sticker on my laptop. So they went from stickers on their bottles to stickers on their laptops. But again, they're asking that question, does God care? Does God care about being a barista? I don't see how that applies to kingdom. Does God care about working in sanitation? Does God care? See, sometimes we think the helping professions don't ask as much, to be honest. Well, I'm a nurse, I'm doing good. I'm a doctor, I'm doing good. I'm a teacher, I'm doing good. But everyone else tends to struggle with this question. So, a couple things here. So, I've shared this message, honestly, more times than I can count, and the Lord's been very gracious to me for allowing me to grow in understanding. I've prayed for things I preached 20 years on. I'm like, oh, that wasn't good. But one year I was preaching up in northern Minnesota, and I'm from Minnesota, and it was a men's conference. And it was out in the woods, kind of conference-y, and guys, kind of thing. And I've never done one of those before, at least there. And I asked my wife, I'm like, I don't know what to wear. I know it sounds silly, but I don't know what to wear to something like this. And she's like, here's a button-up shirt and some khakis and put it on. So I wore my dark purple plum button-up shirt and my tan khakis, and I walked into the back of the room that had no less than 200 men, all wearing flannel and John Deere hats, and pretty sure 90% of them were packing heat of some kind. I'm like, I do not fit. I've never been more embarrassed in my entire, these guys are never going to listen to me, ever. But I went up there and I did my thing, and despite looking like a complete tool bag in front of these men, salt of the earth kind of men, and same thing happens every single time. It's usually men who are 60 and older, usually white hair, balding typically, men who have very, very cut up hands. They've worked with their hands most of their life. And usually a line will form. And I will say roughly 8 out of 10 will have tears in their eyes when they want to come talk to me. And they will say, no one has ever told me, fill in the blank, had anything to do with the kingdom. No one ever told me working landscaping had anything to do with kingdom. No one ever told me working the line at the machine plant had anything to do with the kingdom. All that stuff. So these are men, sometimes women too, 65, 70, older, who were trying to love the Lord, but felt a significant portion of their life had nurtured as an incredible man. He asked me if we could hang out afterwards. We happened to live very close to each other in the Twin Cities, so we were able to meet up for coffee, and this is Caribou. And Richard's older. He was pretty recently widowed, and we just sit and talk, and he would just tell me story after story after story. He would tell me how he and his wife used to win roller skating contests, right? He told me about the time that he met Bill Gates in his garage before Bill Gates was Bill Gates. That is Bill Gates' garage, where he built Microsoft. And then he also told me how he was in the platoon with Elvis, right? So Elvis is in that picture with him, right? Just incredible stories. And I remember the very first time, I'm an introvert by nature, but I can listen and ask questions for quite a while. But we were there for like 2 hours, and I'm like, okay, Jesus, like my assignment is not counselor. I almost said my calling's on counselor. That would be that. No, my assignment's not counselor. So I'm like, okay, Lord, I'll stay with this. But I'm like, I'm done. And then there's a kind of a longer pause, and he kind of basically spilled out the whole message of, I've worked my whole life. He worked for Microsoft primarily, and most of his life. And he's like, no one has ever shared with me, shown me scripturally that what I was doing had any purpose other than making money for the church, making money for people who did ministry. And he was crying. He was a crier. He's a great crier. And he was crying, and I cried with him. And we talked, and he let me hold his hand, and we continue to talk. And we've met every Saturday for over a year, and it's been awesome. So there's a lot of Richards out there. There's a lot of Richards in our ministries out there right now who are trying to figure out why God cares or doesn't care. Work isn't a necessary evil. These are the things I like to share. Work isn't a necessary evil. It was part of God's good design before sin ever entered the world. This is what Eric shared earlier. Because of Genesis 3, we sometimes treat work as kind of thorns and thistles, like it's bad and it's because of the fall and all this other stuff. And it's just not true. And even though it's hard, it can be hard, obviously. But when the gospel meets our work, like we see it in Genesis 2, even the ordinary becomes sacred. It's not just a job, it's kingdom assignment. And even teaching and preaching on this stuff, it's not like you hear it and you're like, okay, my life has changed. Just like with any other areas of faith, it has to be something that has to be chewed on, stewed on, and constantly reminded. And so I would encourage you, as you work with your marketplace believers, this is not just a one-time message, right? I think here you guys did a couple weeks, didn't you? Just pounding at it. I think the best churches are doing what this church here is doing, where they're teaching about it, and then they're offering conferences and so forth to engage the business leaders. Marketplace believers just don't earn paychecks. They reveal Jesus through their integrity, creativity, and love. This is the mission. This is the mission. And when you share that with someone and they start to get it, it's like watching a newborn child walk then run. It's amazing. I've seen lives transformed. I've seen churches transform. I've seen ministries transform when their marketplace believers get this. Genesis 2:15, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work and take care of it. We know this. Mark Green, I've heard him say this live, and you literally could hear a pin drop. After he said this, everyone was like, ooh. He said, the opposite of secular is not sacred, it's unbelief. The opposite of secular is not sacred, it's unbelief, right? Because again, that means we need to be able to see Jesus in all things and stop this kind of compartmentalizing him in our lives. All right, let's go to the next one. Third, we got 4. We're only going to do 4. How do I bring the gospel into my everyday work life? This is probably the second most question I get asked. And if you want to give a really quick answer to a marketplace believer, this is what I would say. Just show a little bit of love. You just show a little bit of love, it will go very, very far, right? Just bear the fruit of the Spirit. You're good. Just bear fruit of the Spirit, and you will be a living, walking testimony of God. Just go love. You're good. You're good. But let's do this again, all right? How would a boomer say this? How do I bring the gospel into my everyday work life? How do I share the truth at work without crossing lines, but still staying true to my faith and by not affirming their sin? I hear that quite a bit throughout. How do I share the gospel and be present with sinners and not affirm their sin? We're not going to talk about it now, but I get that question a lot when it comes to the LGBTQ community. How do I testify to them? Aren't I affirming their sin by being with them in their life in some way? Gen X, how do I show the love of Jesus at work without coming off pushy? That is a huge Gen X statement right there, because we're very relational. Or watering it down to just being nice, okay? Millennials, how do I share my faith at work without disrespecting their culture? That's the number one millennial statement that I hear. I want to share Jesus, but I don't want them to take away the culture and their life. And well, okay, let's talk that out. And then Gen Z, how do I rep Jesus at work without being that cringe Christian? And they usually don't say cringe. They'll use a couple other sassy, spicy. They'll use some other spicy words in place of that. But for many of them, they've seen Christianity misrepresented, and they don't want to have an allegiance towards that kind of Christianity. So how do they talk about Jesus in a very real and authentic way and not feel misaligned? Okay, I figure we're of a certain generation, and most of us know what Top 10 is with David Letterman. Is that true? Yes? Okay, millennials and Gen Zers, let us tell you something. There used to be a thing where we would watch the news at night, and then we would watch this thing called a late night show with David Letterman. And that's where we got kind of our entertainment news before we went to bed. And he would do funny bits called Top 10. And he would work it backwards from 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, all the way up to 1. He would ask funny questions. So here we go. This is not as funny, but why I do not share my faith at work. These are real answers that I have received through various surveys, relationships, and so forth. So number 10, these are all real. Let me see, too, if you've heard these or you've said them yourself, let's go and raise our hands. Let's share this together. Why I do not share my faith at work. Number 10, I've never been trained or discipled on how to do this. This statement is becoming more and more prevalent. I can only speak for the U.S., but we're faltering on discipleship. We're faltering in discipleship. Okay? So people just don't practically know how to do it. Number 9, I'm just trying to survive my job. Ministry feels like extra pressure. That's a Gen Xer right there. I'm already working hard. Don't add anything to the menu, please. Number 8, my workplace is super secular. It would be weird. I hear that a lot from millennials and Gen Zers. Number 7, I don't have a dramatic testimony, so I'm not sure what I'd say. Boomers say that the most to me because they were raised in the faith. A lot of them were, right? Like, I don't have this Paul kind of story. I just kind of went to Sunday school and accepted Jesus on the wood bench that my grandmother and my parents sat on, and right. Number 6, I'm worried they'll think I'm judging them. Very Gen Z millennial. 5, what if I'm rejected or it affects my career? Number 4, I'm not even sure how to bring Jesus into my workplace without crossing a line very similar to one of these down here. Number 3, what if I mess up the moment? A lot of fear of just messing it up. Right? Has anyone else, come on, has anyone else felt like that? I have. Like, I don't want to mess this up, so I'm just going to shut up. And this is one of the things I always like to say. God is sovereign. Just open your mouth. If Moses can obey with a deep fear of going against what he was raised and feeling not like he was able to speak, we should be able to lean forward as well. Number 2, I don't want to be the guy who comes off as pushy. And the number one reason why I do not share my faith at work, what if I witness to someone and then they see me in traffic 10 minutes later? I get variations of that statement. Hey, I blew up in a meeting. How in the world am I going to skills be used on the mission field? I don't get this question asked specifically like this, but I will say this. Most marketplace people do not understand that they are both called, they are responsible for the whole world, right? But 2, they have very limited models of what missions looks like to them, okay? And I'll say this too. The faith and work movement in the late 90s and early 2000s saved my life. I think I kept on serving the Lord because of the faith and work movement. The faith and work movement was some of this stuff. Your work matters to God, and they walked us through all the theology, and it was perfect. But it just fell slightly short on one thing. It made us so focused on evangelizing our workplaces that we lost sight of our responsibility for the global world. That's where it missed. And frankly, that's where we're at with the Stonetable. Our job is trying to get people excited about Jesus at work and around the world. And is the most important statement in our mission statement. All right, so how would a boomer say this? I've built businesses, managed teams, and solved real problems. Could that actually serve God's mission, or is that just secular stuff? Gen X, I'm pretty good at marketing and spreadsheets. Does that actually matter for global missions, or is that just my side hustle to real ministry? Millennials, so, can God use my tech skills for missions, or do I have to learn an acoustic guitar and move to a hut? It could mean that. Gen Z, I don't have a Bible degree, so does that mean I shouldn't go into missions? I actually think the future of missions is going to come out possibly more likely out of our business schools in the marketplace, right? I really think there's opportunity there that we're not tapping into. Acts 18, 1-4, Paul worked as a tent maker while planting churches. The next wave of missions, I just said that from Patrick. The next wave of missions will come through the marketplace. Here are the 4 questions that we just went through. Am I less called because I'm not a pastor or missionary? 2, does God actually care about my 9 to 5? 3, how do I bring the gospel into my everyday work life? And 4, could my marketplace skills be used in the mission field? I am on my hands and knees. If we can teach the people that we are responsible for leading in our ministries these 4 things, I've seen it. I've just seen it and I've experienced. I've seen revival happen because they all of a sudden invite Jesus into all aspects of their life, right? And it just changes everything. It changes everything. So with our last few minutes, what I thought we could do is, DJ, can I have some music? A couple beats here. I'm going to put some questions up. And I know this is really easy because I've talked a lot. I didn't have you guys do anything. But I'm going to ask that you not play on your phones and smartwatches, but if you could pull out your journals. I have 3 questions. And even if you're a seasoned leader or new to this, I'm going to ask that you think through these answers and write them down. And then we're going to do something with it afterwards. So just a couple minutes, but let me have some music. Here's the first question. What are the marketplace believers in my church or my ministry hearing? Whatever your circle of responsibility is, whether you're leading a church or part of a church, leading a ministry or part of a ministry, What are the marketplace believers and my church ministry hearing? And there's absolutely no judgment in this question whatsoever. But it's a self-reflection. Is it something that you see your church or ministry being intentionally engaging with? Is it a byproduct? Is it whatever it is? But whatever it is, think about it. And question 2, what could spiritual growth look like for my marketplace believers in these areas that we just talked about beyond attending a service? I'll say it again. What could spiritual growth look like for them in these areas beyond just attending a service, beyond a great message on Sunday morning? And then 3, how would I practically advise a marketplace believer to engage in global missions? All right, so if I could have some music, let's just take a couple minutes, take notes in your phone, write it down, but I would really like you to write it down, not just think about it. There's power in writing down. Just take a minute or two.